you know, as it is, you can always have a situation where, for all intents and purposes, you want the crowd to pay attention. Crowd ain't paying attention. It's too sunny. People are drinking too much, and it's like they're getting involved with it.
Yeah, but if I was there, hon, and I could see that Ferris wheel, I'd be looking at that Ferris wheel.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So it's gonna be happening. But anyway, we're live, everybody. Welcome to Brainfood Live On Air. It's episode 117, bringing it to you every Friday. You might be able to see I'm in a slightly different venue from usual, and that's because I'm actually in a theme park. I'm in Dreamland, supporting the good people at the Recruitment Events Company. We just had a first, basically, in-person conference. Kind of a mini rec fest. Is 1,000 people here though, so it's like a really well turned out outdoor only type of event, so hopefully COVID safe and all the rest of it. But yeah, really good to get out there and show that support. However, nothing, not even Wreckfest, will interfere with Brainfood Live On Air. So I had to make sure I'd find a spot to be here, and I'm delighted to talk about this show today, because it's something I think is really interesting, because there's been so much demand for recruitment and recruiters, that it must have crossed your mind to think about, is now the moment to think about setting up some sort of recruiting business, because there is so much going on in terms of demand for our types of services that I might have crossed your mind. So today we're going to be talking about lessons from starting and scaling recruiting businesses. And we've got a wonderful guest lineup for us to talk through that. Okay, anyway, quick sound check, folks, because obviously I'm doing this from outside in kind of festival Wi-Fi. So I want to make sure everyone can hear me okay. People on the crowdcast, if you can hear me okay, can you please say hello? We are live on LinkedIn as well. So you hear me on LinkedIn Live, please let me know. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, something like this. I think I am. I can see myself there, so it looks like it's okay. I have no idea what's going on Facebook, because I actually scheduled an event rather than go live, so it probably hasn't fired off. But if you can hear me there, please let me know. Okay, everyone says I sound great, which is actually remarkable, because I am literally sitting on a park bench in a field. So hat tip to the Wi-Fi here. Okay, a quick word to our sponsors. We want to thank our awesome sponsors at Greenhouse for sponsoring this episode. For those of you who don't know, Greenhouse are one of the leading next generation ATSs out there, always appearing in the upper quadrant. Whenever you look at any Gartner type of matrix, they're right up there. If you're looking to upgrade and modernize your core applicant tracking system, Greenhouse is a product you should definitely check out. They've just gonna US based, but they've been in Europe for a while, and they're expanding their European operations as well. So do make sure you check them out. They've also got a kind of a community they want to promote, which is called Greenhouse Talent Makers on LinkedIn. And it might be worth your while to check that out as well. So join that link I've just shared with you, Greenhouse Talent Makers. These are folks that really care about, the quality of recruiting. And they've built software around to support that. Okay, let's get on with it. I just want to thank my co-pilot today for coming on and doing a show with me, Louise Trions. Louise, great to see you.
Thanks for having me. So I helped out a couple of weeks ago, and Adam was totally cool about that. He was really kind of generous and magnanimous. I noticed that this week he said that he's been usurped and kicked off, and that he's only allowed on as a guest. So I think now the tide has turned.
Well, you know what? Adam's being demoted. I mean, not that guest and co-host are in any way different in terms of status. But in this case, I think Adam's experience actually might be quite interesting. You know, Adam always gets pissed off when I say, we don't know anything about this. But I think he actually knows something about starting up and scaling businesses, because he's done it a couple of times and different types of companies as well. So I think he's got a lot to offer as a guest. So he's coming on a bit later. And we've got, we're going to talk embedded recruiting model. We're going to talk community-led model. We're going to talk recruitment agency. We're going to talk recruitment vendor as well. So it's going to be really exciting. But anyway, let's quickly review the newsletter as we always do. I know, Louise, you probably have not read this. But if you have, please say what was interesting. And if you haven't, admit it now.
So I saw it come in on Sunday morning and I put it in my to read folder, and unbelievably today's Friday. So Hung, tell me what the best content was that you think was in there.
You know what? I will tell you exactly what was great in this episode. All of it was great. However, I think one of the best things was finding a job with TikTok resumes. I know a lot of people criticize video, a lot of people criticize TikTok, but you have to respect a product that has achieved 3 billion downloads. It's the only app that isn't owned by Facebook that's achieved that. And when you've got that kind of global reach and they suddenly start launching a recruitment product, you better pay attention, especially if you want to build brand with the next generation, the post Facebook generation. I think you do need to check that out. So they've launched, I think it's just a very simple, let's record a video and send it in as a resume, let's say. But ultimately, it is it's a useful tool. I wouldn't say it's really great for people looking at candidates coming through, simply because of the volume is not a volume tool. But it seems to me that if you're a brand that wants to kind of be cool with the kids and you're not on TikTok, you really should be. So something you should check out. Okay.
I did see that actually, Hung. I saw that you did share it in Facebook, and whilst you're saying it sounds very interesting, I think that there was entirely negative comments to what you shared. Yeah. I don't think a single person was actually positive about it, were they?
It's because they're too old. I'm going to throw the generational card at it. I'm going to say the people that listen to me are just ancient and past it, maybe. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I think it's less about acquisition of candidates. It's more about brand building. There's even a little tab that says, employers that accept TikTok resumes. I mean, you want to be one of those employers, right? Yeah. Even if it's never going to be a volume tool, you should be there. So yeah, that was really cool. Second thing I thought was really interesting and kind of a joke, but also video related, but important. I'm just wearing specs again. Let's take these off. But kind of important. And this is this really cool website set up by these Flemish hackers who basically are analyzing how distracted Flemish politicians are by looking at how many times they check their phone. And this is because the discussions that happen within this particular legislative body is actually live streamed in Belgium. And so you can actually spot how your MP's doing and are they doing any work. And they've automated it so that every time they see an MP or a politician check their mobile phone, they will send an automatic public tweet and say, hey, pay attention at whoever it is. Check it out. Anyway, a lot of fun. You should have a look at it. I think it's worth thinking about. Reason why I included it in Recruiting Brain Food, though, was because we are often very concerned about surveillance and the ethics of workforce surveillance, and are people doing their jobs, and how do we monitor this? But everyone seemed to have a laugh at this particular example. And I just think that, okay, maybe it's less about the manner of maybe it's less about the manner of surveillance. It's more about who is surveilling who. Like maybe we don't want our bosses surveilling the employees, but perhaps it's okay to surveil the politicians who technically should be working for the citizens. Anyway, check it out. I think humorous thing, maybe something that should be applied to other political bodies, but also gets you thinking a little bit about, okay, what is going on in terms of our attitude to surveillance tech. Okay, final thing before we move on to the body of this, I'm going to share a report in the chat stream, which probably no one read because it was too long. But I have to say, this is a must-read, must-download report. It's called the New Future of Work Report 2021, internal research conducted by Microsoft, and in fact conducted by Microsoft from all of their key functions. So GitHub were doing it, Microsoft Azure were doing it. Different types of companies and subdivisions within Microsoft contributed to this internal document, which they've now made public. And it's all about how they're coping with distributed working, who does what, What are the impacts? What's going up? What's going down in terms of activities and behaviors and stuff like this? I think it's one of the deepest primary sets of data that you can get hold of. And if you care about, this new model of work that we're doing, you really do have to check this out. New future of work report. I think no one read it because it was too intimidating. It's a report. Let's not read it.
Let me just show you, anybody who's watching, what it looks like. Hold on, because I've just opened it now. Okay.
Are you blank?
Who wants to read that?
Cool, yeah.
I mean,
yeah. I blame the font, and they haven't got any colours on, and they haven't got images on. I get it.
There's an image. Yes.
It takes a while to get there, but you're right. I mean, we need to image support. They actually need to do a better job of producing reports like this because we consume information in a different way these days. But this thing is chunkable. It's not academic data. It's written by people who work in these companies, and it's not particularly turgid. So definitely worthwhile checking it out. It's really cool. Anyway, let's move on to the topic at hand, Louise. Starting and scaling recruiting businesses. I actually asked you to be a guest on this because you've got some experience, definitely interesting experience of setting up your own company, pre-COVID. And I guess the ambition here is to think about what are the differences do you think are between setting up a company now compared to what it was like, in the before times. I mean, do you have an opinion on that, Louise?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I don't have any experience in starting or setting up a recruitment business, which is why I was happier to be a host. It's a topic that I talk about a lot with people. I can't tell you how many people come to me saying, I'm thinking of starting up a recruitment business. What do I need to know? What technology do I need? Where's it best to start? So yeah, I talk about it a lot, but I'm not an expert because it's not what I do. And there are going to be some challenges right now. So I was talking to Erica, who runs a CRM, and it's a CRM for startups. And she said, I've got this company who are just buying the tech, and I need to send them to some resources about how to do recruitment. And I was like, right. And she's like, yeah, really, really entry level, how to understand what recruitment actually is and then how to do it. And to my mind, that is just what is that person doing? That they're joining the market now. They don't understand the basics of what the recruitment role is, and they need to start at the real entry level. Now, they're going to really struggle at any point in time. But right now, even more.
So you think that like industry or domain knowledge is something you should have in your locker somewhere before you enter into the recruiting space?
I've always said that in an ideal world, what you would do if you wanted to start a recruitment business is work in recruitment first. So, you wouldn't just be, I'm an amazing pharmacist, I'm going to hire pharmacists. You'd think, I'm going to work in a pharmaceutical recruitment business for 2 years, I'm going to learn the ropes, and I'm going to set up on my own. And I think that has always been a good strategy. Finding a mentor who knows the space is quite a good strategy. And I'm sure people have got much better strategies than me. But just going in cold, knowing nothing at all about recruitment in the market right now is petrifying. Okay, Adam totally disagrees with me. So when we get Adam on, let's get Adam to have that conversation.
Yeah, I'd actually want to ask the crowd as well. If you're starting a recruitment business, like how important is domain knowledge? Like how many of you have set up a recruitment business coming from cold, from like a different industry? And was this something that you think is important? I'm kind of in Adam's sort of boat a little bit. I reckon it's totally possible because recruiting is quite a simple type of business. I'm talking recruitment agency here. And ultimately the mechanics of it aren't difficult to learn. It's more about your attitude and your application, and whether you actually enjoy kind of the rhythm of work, I guess. But other people might have different opinions. So I'd welcome your thoughts on this, folks. Is domain knowledge important? Yes, no, let me know. Okay, so for the people on Crowdcast, if you have any questions for our panel, use the ask a question feature at the bottom. We're going to get to them at the end. But let's bring on some of our guests, Lou. We're going to bring on Alex Van Claveren, who I haven't spoke to for a long time, since probably pre-COVID, actually, because we had a nice dinner someplace, a nice lunch, I think. And that was like just before the big first lockdown. So I haven't seen Alex since that time. And there he is. There he is. Alex, how are you doing, sir?
Yeah, super well. You?
Yeah, very well, mate. Very good to see you. I was just reminiscing. The last time we were talking, we were having that Japanese meal, weren't we, in Shoreditch somewhat, and that was such a long time ago. So great to see you. And there's
Thanks for having me
Katrina
on.
Hutchison O'Neill. No, you're very welcome. Okay, let's do some intros real quick. Alex, can you quickly introduce yourself? Like, who are you and what it is you do?
Sure. So I'm called Alex McClaveren. I'm the CEO of a company called Candidate. I started my company with no recruitment experience, so this could be interesting. And we've been going for 5 years now.
Cool. Very good. But I would say you had some recruitment experience because you hired a lot of people as a general manager, didn't you? So you almost had like, if you like, hiring manager experience moving into recruiting, which is actually a very interesting journey to make. Okay, let's go to you, Katrina. Katrina, good to see you as ever. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you and what it is you do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a while. How are you? So yeah, I'm Katrina Hutchison O'Neill. I am CEO and co-founder of Join Talent. So I am probably a little bit different, left behind, everyone thought I was crazy at the time, a pretty successful career leading in-house TA functions to start up an embedded solutions and consultancy business. And that was back at the beginning of 2019, which simultaneously feels a really long time ago and about 2 seconds ago, depending on what time of the day you ask me.
Yeah, fantastic. And you're right about how time is just shifted. Like I can't understand how time works anymore. Here I'm at RecFest, obviously at this festival, and I'm meeting people I haven't seen for it is 2 years plus. But it doesn't compute. Like, is it 2 years? Is it actually 18 months? Is it 1 year? What? It's difficult. But very interesting.
My 8-year-old actually brought you up as a time warp today, hun. I said I was coming on here today, and she's like, "Oh, is that the guy that gave me a piggyback in Australia last year?" And I'm like, "That was literally 2 years ago."
That was 2 years ago. Oh my good Lord! And how is I forget the little lady's name?
Rowan. Yeah, no,
Rowan,
she's great. Loving life on our one day of summer in Scotland. That's it. It's going to start to be autumn tomorrow, I'm sure, but we've got sunshine today.
Right. Well, hello, Rowan. Good to hear from you. Okay, let's get on with the show, folks. Let's talk about starting and scaling startups. I mean, both of you are kind of working in a similar type of business, deploying recruiting solutions to growing businesses. What differences have you seen in terms of customer attitude before and after pandemic, should we say? Has there been a difference? And if so, what is that? If there's no difference, what are your thoughts on this? Let's go with you first of all, Alex.
Sure. Well, I mean, straight away, obviously, from about April onwards, it was extremely quiet, but that was felt by everyone in the kind of recruitment industry. And I think what we saw, and we just deal with kind of Series A, Series B, is they tried to do some of the hiring in-house. And it was only once the hiring got over 5 per quarter or 10 per quarter that they started looking for other solutions. So it quite quickly, by about September, we started to see things start to go back to some normality. However, it did in that second lockdown, things, CEOs got scared again. But then from January of this year, it's just exploded. And I think everyone in the recruitment industry, I think internationally, is just feeling that. And long may it continue.
I think that's a go to you with that, Katrina. Have you discerned a similar pattern, or what about the customer behavior you've seen from, the period before and after, so to speak? Not that we're through it yet, but you know what I mean? It's kind of been this kind of weird roller coaster situation. We're in some sort of different place than we were 12 months ago.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Alex said in terms of the cadence of what's happened in the market. I think what's probably more striking to me, though, is, and putting aside the volume and how volcanic the market is on every front at the minute, it's probably the differences in the market's understanding of Project RPO as a solution of embedded talent solutions. So I remember, hitting the mean streets of London back in the early days of 2019 and my diary full of meetings, all usually around Shoreditch, but with founders and even TA leaders. And the biggest bit of those conversations was trying to explain the concept of what a PRPO or an embedded talent solution model was. That just doesn't happen anymore. It's really rare that I go into, and I do pitches 2-3 times a day. And it's really rare that you have to have a conversation about what the concept of the solution is. They fundamentally get it. There might be the very rare, and I mean literally 1 in 10 maybe, you have to explain the commercial model because they still think it's an agency model. They think they're going to have to pay per candidate or something. But that's been a huge shift. And I think that's because the PRPO market is starting to develop a little bit in maturity and people get it. So that's been the most past remarkable point for me, rather than just the heat of the market.
You know what? That's a really interesting. Go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, small thing to add there. I think we definitely saw a shift where, it used to be Series A kind of later where this was a good fit. What we're starting to see is startups actually, even at late seed, are bringing in and actually hiring like a head of people or actually hiring like a head of talent acquisition. And then I think what they think is that's going to solve all their recruitment needs, which short terms it kind of can do. Once the hiring goes over 3-4 per month, actually then they would need to bring in a kind of embedded recruiters. So I think there's been a shift there in the attitude of actually focusing on the people side and the timing of when that happens, in startups at least.
You know what? That's a really positive to hear what both of you said there, in the sense that it looks like the market literacy's improved, because you ask the random person in the street, you say recruitment, they all think recruitment agency. So even in-house recruiting is something that needs to be, sometimes differentiated from agency. But now we have a third type of model, which is kind of historically always been in like big banks, let's say, or, companies that were just, out of a lot of people's experience. But now we're seeing the popularity of this model, especially for rapidly growing businesses, irrespective of size. And it's, I think, a wonderful thing that you don't need to go and explain it. And I think the UK, as a matter of fact, has a very strong set of companies that are delivering value to this marketplace. You look at European context, even US context or whatnot. I'm not sure whether UK may not have the best types of companies doing this right now. Your two businesses in amongst the number, but there's other businesses out there that are doing fantastically well. And you think this could be almost like a center of excellence for how this type of service can be delivered. Moving on to talk a little bit about it from a business perspective. So the topic of this talk is how do you scale it as the CEO or the MD of the business? What have you learned? One of the things I actually joked about was okay, give us a painful lesson that you know now that you didn't know when you set up the company. Is there any advice that you could impart to people who might be thinking, yeah, I fancy setting up a business? Any thoughts on this?
I think personally, the hardest thing about starting a business is starting it. It doesn't matter about the depth of your experience or your background. That was actually a strange lesson for me to learn, which I had to learn really quickly at the beginning. You might have even had a career where you've been very successful in your sector and you've got a really good network. But when you're selling your solution as a business, even though, especially in those early days, you're going to be the beating heart of that, you'll be designing the solution, you'll be overseeing it, the client still separates you from that. So they want to know, what did your brand, so in our case, what's Join Talent's experience of doing X, Y, or Z? And I remember those first few sales where you're like, well, none, because I literally started it 2 seconds ago, but I've been doing this for 20 years. Let me tell you about my experience. And so companies, I always thought that was really funny at the start, companies that I wouldn't in a million years have gone in as the director of TA because they didn't need somebody at that level. But yeah, they couldn't see that. So that made it really hard. And you've just got to fight to get those first few clients on board and be careful about the companies that you're working with to build the right case studies. But once those are in place, it does get a lot easier as you move on. But starting is difficult.
You know what? I think there's two elements of starting, isn't there? I mean, firstly, starting yourself, like getting on and doing it. Like, how many of us are thinking about starting a recruiting business? But guess what? You've been thinking about it for the last 6 months and it's not happened. And it's going to be another 6 months and another 6 months, another whatever, and it still won't happen. So getting that moving is the first thing you got to do. And then once you've set it up, it's also like, how do you do the first customer acquisition? That's going to be hard because you have no track record. How can you kind of differentiate, especially as we're talking briefly in the UK market, that it's competitive. You've got great competitors in there that have helped educate the market as to what it's all about. So how do you do that? I think you either get lucky, you end up sort of working hard to get that one customer that's going to give you a shot. Maybe now is the time to leverage some of your older network. Your social capital of the leader, I think, is important. Again, another lesson for anybody, always be building your network, because this is when it's going to count. If you're starting completely cold from outside in, that just means you got more yards to have to swim through, and it's tougher and harder to do. Go to you with the same question, Alex. Give us something that you've learned sort of as you move from being kind of a senior exec for companies and then starting up your own thing. Like, what have you learned about yourself and about, the action of doing this that you would, let's say, do differently if you were to do it again?
Well, I mean, I've definitely learned, I guess, quite a lot about it. Was big. I mean, previously to this, I'd done lots of management, but not client side in this way. And I think the one big mistake that we made was we tried to scale too quickly. They're winning a few clients. We had 3 or 4. We had 3 or 4 talent partners, and it all started to feel extremely manageable. We had some good results, and then we thought, right, we can start scaling. And I think you over 5+ talent partners, that's where all the challenges really started to come in. With this particular model, the expectations on that talent partner are extremely high. So they expect them to know how to hire an SDR and a CRO or a full stack. So for us, the challenge was actually to find talent partners who actually had the breadth of experience, who actually had the process side, who were able to actually handle a senior management team. So kind of once we started actually to hit some challenges between clients 5 and 10, we actually had to go back to the drawing board and actually started looking about the selection, the training, and the onboarding of the talent partners. I guess the more clients we've done, we've also started to see more challenging situations. So again, unfortunately, it comes down to the boring stuff. It's process, and actually having a good process in place and collecting all of those learnings so that when you do have a new client, you've actually got all that ready. So that's what's taken us. It's taken us years just to get that actually ready.
Yep.
Your video just dipped out, by the way there, Alex. If you're wondering why Hung had a slightly concerned look on his face, I suspect you noticed that, Hung. I had a question for both of you.
Okay,
It's just a bit patchy, but we can hear you, so it's fine. I've got a few questions if I can chip in. One of the questions I had for Katrina was that Hung mentioned about leveraging your network. And I think that when people are thinking about starting up something, that is something they are considering. Do I have a strong network? Would you be able to say how important that was to you? Because you are so well known.
Yeah, critical, absolutely critical. I think the credibility that you have in the space is really important, particularly in those early days when you're wanting people to buy into your brand, but you in the early days don't have those case studies. I can't imagine what it must be like trying to start a business like this without that network. Significantly harder. That's been a massive help. But then on the other side, which I think is a really good kick in the butt sometimes as well. I had lots of those early experiences where you go into pitch and you're in a different world. So I've got a really good network in the corporate space, the enterprise space, the bigger end of the scale-up space. My co-founder has an excellent network in that kind of unicorn scale-up space and corporate. But neither of us had spent that much time in the micro scale-up space. And yet that's where a lot of our early customers, even today, we've got a broad, diverse range of customers. A lot of our customers are in that space. And I remember going into those first meetings, as I said, back in 2019, and you'd sit in front of a founder of a scale-up and they'd be asking about how we could support their recruitment. And I remember one of them saying, well, how do I know you know what you're talking about? And I was like, I could show you an award. I'm not really sure. But I don't really know how to answer that because I've been doing it for 20 years. But none of that mattered to him, that guy I was talking to. You know, the fact that I'd been delivering 25, 30,000 hires a year globally, whatever network I had, you know, whatever talks you might give in the industry, none of that mattered to that founder I was sitting in front of. What he wanted to know is what referenceable case studies could I give him of where you'd done this in organizations like his. And actually, you know what, that was great. So I think you've got to have both. It'd be hard to not have both. Having a network is massively helpful, but you can't just rely on that. You've got to go out and work and build those case studies and build breadth and depth. And honestly, I feel two and a bit years into this journey, my knowledge of the, you know, I thought I knew quite a bit 2.5 years ago, but my knowledge of the TA market and TA operating models and TA challenges has grown exponentially, because I've moved from almost being a career monogamist where you're kind of, you know, going in and working with one company for 2 years, 3 years at a time, to, you know, like today we've got like 36, 37 clients that we're working with simultaneously in 16 countries, and we're sector agnostic. And you're getting to find out about every single one of those companies and their challenges and their structures. So I think you need to have a good network, a growth mindset, and be prepared to be pretty humble and get your arse kicked every now and then.
That's really good, Katrina. I think Adam's mentioned something really interesting as well. Like the founder network is like hyper important. So maybe it's not so much like domain knowledge, although it's kind of adjacent to that, but it's not domain knowledge specifically, but it's network knowledge. Like how many people can you lean on to get an easy sale, so to speak, if you want to crunch it down to the brass tacks.
I don't think it's not just sales. I think, and Alex, I think what you mentioned before was really interesting about the journey that you went, because you hadn't been in recruitment before, and that journey where you almost scaled too quickly and then had to come back. But we didn't have to do that bit because we'd literally been doing recruitment for 20 years and we'd run things. So we knew from the beginning how to scale something like this because we're used to running teams of 300, 400, 500 recruiters. So I think it's a different knowledge that will come in a different way that will help you but you have to, whatever it is that you didn't know. So for me, it was, I didn't know the scale up world well enough. You have to go and learn it really fast. The market will not be forgiving if you don't learn it fast. And I'm sure, Alex, that's what you experienced as well.
All right. So just one thing you touched on there was just the founders' distrust. I mean, founders incredibly well connected between themselves through the VCs, through all sorts of things. And I think even sometimes with those case studies, they don't believe, you know. So I think there is something about really understanding the founder mindset. That I think that I did understand for sure, but it's taken us a while to break into certain networks. And the VCs probably, as you find, are a very good way into that.
That's really interesting. So the skepticism of founders is something that needs to be considered for anybody supplying into this type of business. And by the way, founder, it could be substituted for whatever buyer that is, you know, you're selling into. You know, consider who the buyer model is, and then, or should I say, consider who the buyer persona is, and you've really got to understand what their objections to you might be, and then have a way to overcome those objections. You can rely a little bit on your network. If you know, possibly rely a little bit on case studies if you've acquired them in some way, that will help you as you go forward. Maybe a third way to do it is to have like a clear delivery model, like a clear thing you're going to do for them. Like the worst thing you can do is say, yeah, we can do it this way. You've got to actually have your own way of doing it, and then understand what that philosophy is and be able to communicate it to those people. Okay. A final question for you guys, because we want to kind of move to different types of businesses. But there's one thing I want to talk to you about. How did you get over your first like bad client experience? So this is where customers engage. You've done the acquisition side, you've engaged the customer, etc. For whatever reason, it's not been a great project. It happens. This is inevitable in business. But how do you kind of get over that? What is the steps you take when you have a poor end to a relationship with the client? Any experience or prepared to share some insight on that, either of you two?
I'll jump in. Look, I mean, it does happen in recruitment. It's never linear, and some of the challenges, that is probably the most challenging thing. I think the way I always deal with it is, firstly, just give them their money back. That's always a good start. I think, secondly, we try and do a deep dive with them of what could we have done differently. And then just try and leave it in a good place. I think there's always two sides to it. It's never just our fault, but to try and really understand that, that's always the way that I've dealt with these type of things. Yep, cool.
Yeah.
So basically, go ahead, Katrina.
No, I was gonna say. So we
Louise.
actually picked something up from one of our clients. One of our clients has a thing they call ZAP, which is a zero asshole policy, and I love that. And we kind of adopted that early on. You can tell very early on sometimes when you're talking to a potential client if they fundamentally do not want to understand the service proposition that you're bringing, if they're only seeing it as utterly transactional and commoditized, stack them high, sell them cheap type of model, we're not the right solution for them. And not because we're not commercially competitive, because we're very competitive, because we're offering a value add embedded service. So we're going to deliver great results for you, but in a partnership approach. We're not there for you to kick and to beat, right? We're there to work with you. So, early on, I'd say that, there's been a couple of times where we've probably taken on business that in hindsight today, we wouldn't, because the warning signs perhaps were there. And what we've had to do, probably a little bit like what you've said, Alex, is ultimately we always want to deliver an amazing client experience. So if it's our fault and we've taken on a gig that in hindsight we shouldn't have, then ultimately it just costs us money to fix it, because what we'll do is throw more resources at it if we need to fix it, to make sure that client ends up with a great result. But we will take the learnings from that in terms of what we're going to do next. So I think you've got to be selective. Don't fall into the trap of taking every bit of business, because you could end up having a really negative impact, not just on your brand, but on your team. Our team are our most precious asset. We work really hard to hire amazing people. We know that our team are getting approached 4, 5, 6 times a week each by headhunters. They share with us that they are, so we know they are. If we were giving them bad gigs to work on and we're working with clients they didn't enjoy working with, they wouldn't be here. So it's too important. You've got to protect your team, protect your brand, and learn from any mistakes that you make.
Really important.
So one thing,
morale.
if I may, Hung, is just to say, one thing that I think does protect us, actually both, is when you're embedded, is the actual delivery is fairly transparent. So actually, in many ways, it's the ATS and the pipeline that actually protects the quality and the outcome of a lot of this work. And that's often when we have finders who are skeptical, who say, well, how do I know if this is going to work? And the rest of it is you can actually see fairly early on from a pipeline if this is going to work or not. So that's often where we go back to, is to say, let's just start with the briefing. Let's actually look at the pipeline. And that in many ways actually protects this type of model.
Yeah, and that goes back to, be disciplined with the right implementation of software, be clear on how you kind of make your work transparent. So it's not just delivery of the people. You've got to provide the evidence of the work that you're putting into it. It's almost classic recruitment stuff. I remember back in the day when a great recruitment trainer I had, he said, look, you got to sell the pain. And it's similar to that. It's you've got to can't just deliver end result. You've got to show the working out, so that the founder can see the effort, and can see what's going on. There's a question I didn't ask, but I need to ask it real quick, because I think it's relevant. both of you have talked about embedded recruiter. This made sense in the pre-COVID world where the person was in the client office. Nowadays, that's not happening, and maybe it doesn't happen anymore, because you can imagine it being really strange getting a strange person now sitting in an office. Embedded might be a metaphorical term now, in the sense you're embedded in the company's systems and the digital way and so on like that. What is the impact of your type of business when embedded has turned from a literal thing to a metaphorical thing?
It always has been that for us. So we say embedded, but it's exactly what you said. We're embedded on a white label basis virtually into their team. We are and always have been, before COVID made it fashionable, a remote first company. And our team are currently spread across 6 countries. So we're really, really comfortable with that. If anything, I think the impact of COVID has been that clients now get that, and they get fundamentally how it works.
Right.
You know, in the past, if the client really insisted that they wanted us to put somebody on site, of course, we would make every endeavour to do that, and usually that was fine. That rarely happens now, really rarely. Super minority percentage would ever ask. So I think it's been really positive for us. It's about democratization of opportunities for people, finding the right talent, not just the most local talent. There's a whole separate show, Hung, but I could evangelize all day long about why I think remote is the way of the future, and that's why we set the company up this way from the start.
That's really interesting. How about you, Alex? Thoughts on this transitioning, I guess, from physically putting someone there and sometimes justifying the value, because I'm sending a person there, he's sitting there, 40 hours a week, to working in a remote setting. How has that sort of changed your thinking about this type of business and scaling it up and stuff like this?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been totally liberating because our team were on site, and that was a big part of the sell, and that was how the client actually to know them. Obviously, when this was forced and now it's become the normal, the main thing for us is it's actually allowed our team to work from different places, and it's allowed us to recruit talent partners who could be all across Europe. In fact, they could be all across the world. So from our internal recruitment, it's made it much better. For clients, they've just got used to it. One thing I think we do have to do slightly better is on the reporting side. So we've actually had to increase that side, but still with kind of Zoom and one-to-one, it's really had no impact on the actual delivery.
Very, very interesting. And, that's great because it means probably more people can actually participate in these types of businesses, and more businesses, it's kind of less issue getting some support, whereas previously you'd have to get somebody turning up and you'd presumably have to make friends with them and stuff like this. So now it's like a much accelerated experience. Okay, we've got to move on real quick, you two. So Katrina, thank you very much for joining us. Do say hi to Ron for us. And Alex, thank you so much for joining us as well. Great to see you. We'll catch up for a dinner really soon. We're going to bring on James and Adam on next.
Thanks, everyone.
Super. See you soon. Take care.
So when we get James and Adam on, let's start with that first question that Stephen put in there, which is now a great or a terrible time to start a new recruitment agency? I fancy getting that answered.
I do. Let's get James Osborne on to help us with this one. And you know what? Because of time constraints, Lou, I'm going to bring on Adam as well simultaneously.
That's fine. Yeah, we can work together, me and Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. The primo co-host. Wasn't that interesting to see sort of how this type of model is now evolving? Because you and I have been in the business long enough for this embedded recruiter not to be like popular. It was like only RBS were doing it or whatever. Yeah.
I remember that when I first heard embedded TA, and it wasn't that long ago that I heard that as an expression for the first time.
Yep. Very interesting. And we've got these two gents on. They probably need no introduction, but they're going to do it anyway. So James, can you quickly introduce yourself, who you are, what it is you do?
Yeah, James Osborne, chairman of the Recruitment Network, which is a community of agency recruiters in the UK and internationally. Fantastic.
And Adam Gordon, really, I don't think you've ever introduced yourself because you've always been just the co-host, really. But now's your opportunity, Adam. Who are you and what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. I am CEO and co-founder at Candidate ID, which is a recruitment technology business, and I've been in and around recruitment for 22 years.
Fantastic. Let's go straight to the questions, you two. Louise asked the question. It's a yes, no. Is this a good time? In fact, Louise, you asked the question. You asked it better than I did.
Well, it was Stephen's question. But okay, let's go. Adam, by the way, you look so smart. Are you about to go out for dinner?
No, I've got short sleeves on. I've got shorts on. I'm just smart in the screen.
You look great. Okay.
What about James?
Thanks, Louise. Thanks. Yeah, I was going to say, what about me?
You match your sofa, and I adore it, James. Okay, cool. So the question was, it was Stephen's question. It's a great question. So Adam, you first. Is now a great or a terrible time to start a new recruitment agency?
Well, the question just makes me think of one thing. So the best time to plant an oak tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. So get on with it. Doesn't matter. Just do it.
James?
So are you... Go ahead, James.
Yeah. 100% agree. It's a great time to be starting a recruitment company. Now, there's some amazing startups that are coming into the market who are growing at such a rapid rate. It is unbelievable, unprecedented rate, which is driven by the market conditions. That's just the reality of it. So I think it's a wonderful time to get going.
Cool. I can't say more than that. Okay, so let's talk about how you should get going. That's the next most important question.
Well, before we do that, I just want to interrupt with some kind of market insight. I mean, we've seen a massive shortfall of labor into available job opportunities, and that seems to be like a global thing. And the fact is, I think a lot of people have left the workforce or have now moved to either a part-time, less than part-time, or looking for some more flexibility, and that's caused these vacancies to appear and not be filled. So if you're in a business that's supplying those solutions, whether you're an agency, embedded recruiter, recruitment technology business, or whatever it might be, now is the moment. So follow up to your what you said there, Louise. How do you go about and do it? What are the modern challenges, the post-COVID challenges for setting up and starting a successful recruitment agency? What are those? Let's go to you with that, James.
Yeah, well, just to touch on one quick point that you mentioned there, I think if you go back pre-COVID times and where there was wasn't less of a sort of talent shortage, I suppose. The reality is a lot of recruiters, a lot of recruitment organisations just weren't great at tapping into the whole talent pool that was out there. What's now happening, I still think the market is as strong as it's ever been with regards to talent. I think there's enough candidates out there at the moment. I think what's now happening is recruiters are becoming better at tapping into some of that hidden talent pool that they used to ignore before or weren't able to find before. So I think there's still opportunities out there to place candidates. I think a lot of people fear one of the reasons why they shouldn't start up at the moment is it's pretty easy to pick up jobs right now, but are you going to be able to fill those jobs? I think if you're a damn good recruiter, the market is perfectly right for you. I really believe that.
On that note, Adam, we'll go to you in a sec. No, you just led us on down a path I want to follow, James. On that note, would it make sense for a recruiter to spend time gathering candidates then before launching a recruitment business into a certain sector? So let's say, we've got a shortage of data scientists or whatever. You spend 6 months of your business really just making sure you're building that database of people before you even start acquiring customers. Thoughts on that? Is that archaic way of thinking about it? Is that stupid the way to go? I mean, what are you reading from your intelligence, James?
Yeah, at the moment, the people who are winning the best are the ones who have got communities of candidates that they can tap into. And some of those have been nurturing those for years and years and years. Some of those are really, really fixated and focused on at the moment. I don't believe you can go to market to sell a product if you haven't got a product. And part of, I hate to say it, product is our talent, and that's what we're trying to find. So it's a bit, anyone can go, we've got recruitment businesses at the moment are literally winning business for fun. It is not hard to pick up contracts. Not hard to pick up opportunities. The conversion ratios are the really interesting statistics across every recruitment company right now. How good are you at converting those business into deals, into placements? Yep,
very interesting. And I guess the cultivation of candidate communities, Adam, that's kind of bread and butter for Candidate ID, really, isn't it? What are you seeing in terms of new companies starting to take an interest in this thing, or is it still something you have to battle and argue the intellectual case for?
Well, I think that over the last 18 months, there's been a lot of organizations and individuals looking at why are we doing things the way we were doing them? Is it right? Is it wrong? How do we scale it better? We furloughed a load of people. Do we need to bring them all back? Do we need to build teams the size of what we had pre-pandemic? And automated options have become a lot more real than they maybe were before. So that's one element to that. The second thing is the companies that are the most successful at hiring today are the ones that have spent the pandemic building talent pipelines, obviously. And the third aspect to that is the companies that didn't do a good enough job on that are relying on applicants, and they're constantly bitching about we're not getting enough applicants every day. Like, that was never the right thing for you to be focused on in the first place. So, it's quite a tactical answer, a recruitment answer rather than building a company answer. But that's how I would respond to that one.
So if you're...
Yeah, and I think there's a really valid point to that, which, sorry to interrupt, there's one really valid point to that, and we say this for a lot of people. If you go pre-pandemic times, or from an agency point of view, you're often benchmarked and measured by the size of your headcount. So how many recruiters have you got sitting at desks doing the business? The measurement today is the productivity per headcount, not the volume of headcount. It's different, and that is an amazing situation to be in. Sadly, we had to go through a global pandemic to get that question thrown at us, but people are now realizing that, like, if you get more productivity per consultant, you need half the amount of people in your team to do it, or you have the same amount of people in your team to do it. You're making twice as much profitability, twice as much scalability.
I remember seeing the front page of the 2019 annual accounts for a stock market listed recruitment company, which had a headline figure of, we've got 2,300, not recruiters, by the way, salespeople, 2,300 in our sales team. And, we've achieved 15% growth in sales team headcount in the last 12 months. And that was like one of their core headline figures. And I thought, why the hell is that important? Like, totally irrelevant how many people you've got doing that.
So a recruitment company is going to get smaller, do you think? Like, in terms of
Yeah, of course they are. Yeah. But I want to just ask one question though. Are we talking about the people starting a recruitment business to build a company, or are we talking about, is this a good time to go and work as an independent freelancer? Because those two things are entirely different.
They're not entirely different, but they are different.
No, they absolutely are entirely different. Because the first one is about being a good business person and how do you build a company and how do you be an entrepreneur. And the second one is, how good of an individual recruiter are you? And those skill sets are not the same things. Building a company and being a good independent recruiter are completely different skill sets.
All right, let's go with that. I'll accept that's the correct analysis.
It's just mine.
I've changed my mind. I think you're correct. But James, this is one maybe you can answer a bit better because you have visibility a little bit from the network in general. Are we seeing like a fragmentation of agencies then, in the sense that a lot more one man person type businesses? It's this type of market where, what is it? We're usually 17,000 agencies in the UK, I think, as registered agencies, but that goes to 25,000 or something in the next 12 months or so. Do you have any insight in that?
Yeah, the market is going through a classic cycle that goes through every few years. Nothing is different from this. It's just been in a slightly different way that we've gone about it. So there will be in a post. We've gone through a V-shaped recovery. In the upswing of the recovery, you get hundreds and hundreds of increase in startups, whether they're one-man bands, one-person recruitment businesses, or looking at setting up a company. So that's just natural. You'll always get that. I disagree with Adam slightly on that. The recruitment companies will get smaller, because I think actually what will happen is a lot of the good recruitment companies are actually utilizing this as a great opportunity to take market share. I think what will happen is the mid-sized agencies will actually get bigger, but they are scaling on far greater levels of productivity and performance than they were previously. But no, is it being fragmented? It's exactly the same. Our industry has always been the same. You've got the majority of the industry is the sort of the micro recruitment business. You've got the big chunk in the middle, which is the SME marketplace, which is the area that we predominantly focus on. And then you've got the sort of the big multinational players and that type of stuff. The multinational players, I think, are losing market share, and the SMEs are becoming more astute. We're talking before about embedded solutions, and we can throw words at this RPOs and talent as a service, or whatever you want to call it. The fact of the matter is, the smaller recruitment companies now are now doing things that they would never dream of doing 2 years ago. Far more embedded solutions, far more annuity revenue type business. It's brilliant. That's great. It's changing the market from that point of view.
Can I talk about something slightly different? It's the same thing, but different. So if you're thinking about starting a new recruitment business now, are you thinking about starting it in exactly the same traditional model that recruitment businesses would have operated in? Or would you be thinking about starting something more sophisticated? So something with different pricing structures, with a different way in which you interact with clients? Or are we going to start something up you would have started up in the 90s? Adam?
I remember coming and talking at one of your events about this in Bishopsgate about 6-7 years ago or something like that, actually, Louise. And I believe that you definitely should not be building a company that is basically Hays, but with a different name. You should be going and reading. Anybody thinking about building a recruitment business should go and read Blue Ocean Strategy. Blue Ocean Strategy is about the pursuit of differentiation. It's about making the competition irrelevant, creating uncontested market space by doing things different. And so I've always applied that since I started working for myself in mid 2009. I've never looked at copying other businesses, but that's been my way of doing things. And there are masses of successful recruitment entrepreneurs who have left S3 and they've left the company I used to work for, which was called HW Group or Harrison Willis, to go and build basically versions of the same. And so, you can make a lot of money doing that. But it depends what your values are. If they're to make a dent in the universe and to help, progress our industry, then you go and do things better than they've been done. If you want to make a load of money, then you might just copy what you've left.
Yeah, I think if I can touch on a couple of pieces with that, and Stephen in the chat mentioned that this is not a classic cycle by any description. No. Of course, it's not in principle, Stephen. I agree with you, but I think from a business terms point of view, I think it actually is a classic cycle. I really do, and I think there's a slight challenge at the moment where a lot of people are talking a lot about, because of COVID, the world is going to completely change in how we do business and everything else. I don't think that's true. I think recruitment, the fundamentals of recruitment, the fundamentals of running a business, startup, scale-up business, have never changed and won't change. They are absolutely right. The only difference, and I think, Louise, this is to your point, is I think a lot of people now are doing a lot of the things that they wanted to try and do pre-COVID, but they're now doing a lot more of it. So they're thinking about automation. They're thinking about outsourcing a lot more. They're thinking about having, as Catherine mentioned before, I think having about partnership relationships rather than supply agreements. They're becoming better recruiters. Potentially it's professionalizing the industry, which is not a bad thing on the agency side. So all of these things were happening anyway. I did a presentation recently and I wrote, is this a revolution or an evolution? That wasn't just because it sounded quite nice. It was actually true. I don't think we're going through a revolution at all. I think this is a fast track evolution of what we were going through anyway, personally.
Yeah. And on this note, guys, in terms of the this shift to remote, that kind of tells me that if you're starting up a recruitment agency, your ability to be a better delivery function to companies has improved because maybe you can access more talent from different places. Like recruitment talent from different places. It's not a case where, I'm stuck in London, I can only ever hire London-based recruiters or whatever it is, and that's my first challenge. Now it's like, okay, I can set up a business. You know what? I've got great contacts in the Philippines, let's say. They can do my sourcing for me. I got one person sitting at home doing a part-time thing. He's brilliant at getting on the Zoom call and doing candidate qualifications or whatever. I got another person doing this. Potentially, it kind of, the roles may stay the same, but how those people do those roles and where they're actually based and where they're from might completely change, which ultimately means that there's going to be more competitive offerings from these new players coming in, I think. Is that a characterization you'd have sympathy with, or am I speaking out my ass?
I think you're not speaking out your ass at all. I think the reality, if I give you an example of that, there's an organisation that we work with. They're going to do about £1.2 million this year. So that's basically the back end of last year going into this year. That's in net fee income. They're a one-person recruitment business, and they're going to do 1.2 million. Everything else is outsourced, offshored, or in partnership arrangements. So, and that to me, to touch on the point, like, does that make them an entrepreneur? Does that mean they're just a one-person business? They're absolutely an entrepreneur because they're looking about how do they create a business that is sustainable and scalable, and not restricted by certain things. And in some instances, cash flow, having the ability to attract people to an office space in a certain location are restrictions of growth. We've learned that, which is why we're seeing now why so many organizations are going down the remote route, because it means you can attract so much of a wider net to people. I think it's brilliant.
I agree. Hayes have got 300 software engineers in India. There's recruitment businesses in Australia that get all their sourcing done from their team in the Philippines. It's that way of doing things has been becoming more important, but you don't necessarily need to outsource it today. You can just go and hire people.
Well, isn't outsourcing the sensible thing, though? I mean, one of the concerns that people had about the shift to remote is it just a precursor to a massive wave of offshoring? Because you know what, sourcing, or candidate acquisition, it might just be one of those things, your routine thing in recruitment agencies, in particular, it's done by a young person, an entry-level talent, etc. Why don't I just get somebody who's a lot cheaper and maybe more experienced that can do it from a different location? They can do that, and the job gets pushed out, meaning that the sort of recruiters that we have in the UK ends up being the business developer person or the relationship management person. Do you see that as a trend that's happening? And is it a welcome trend? Thoughts on this?
I think it's part of the process and part of the trend, but I don't think it's the complete story. Louise made a really good point there. That someone used to say to that, good automation is a cover for not knowing how to recruit well. And I think it's sort of valid to a point. I think when people map out the workflow of a recruiter, whether it be from a sales, client acquisition, candidate acquisition to delivery, there are lots of different components. Different parts of that can be automated and or outsourced. I don't think organizations are going, let me offshore everything in my business and just be an account manager. I think they're looking at components of the process and thinking which of those bits can be outsourced or offshored. And I think that's quite smart, actually, because that gives you the ability to scale. It doesn't mean you're recruiting less people for your business in the UK. It means the people you're recruiting are more profitable, more efficient, and more productive.
Very interesting. Okay, let's step aside from recruitment agencies for a moment, because the wider topic was starting and scaling a recruiting business. And there's all kinds of different businesses that do that. And I would say even for you, James, your business would not be called an agency, but it's a type of business that is related to recruiting. And same with you, Adam, with Candidate ID. Do you see any differences in terms of how the world looks like now from your own entrepreneurial perspective? Like, have customer behaviors changed? What seems to work in terms of acquiring customers? Are conversions better? How does it all feel from where you're standing as the CEO of the Recruitment Network and the CEO of Candidate ID?
If you don't mind me jumping straight away on that one, because I'm really enjoying the outputs that are coming from COVID from a business point of view. I'll make that clear, just purely from a business point of view, nothing else. What I'm realizing and what's happened over COVID, without a shadow of a doubt, if I'm allowed to, I presume I'm allowed to swear on these things, I'm not sure, but I am.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, good. So all the bullshit that exists within business, I think 95% of it has disappeared over the last 12 months. So the sales bullshit that goes, all the sort of the stuff, the polite conversations we're having when we didn't really mean it, engaging with people that you didn't want to engage with, but you felt it was the right thing to do. All that stuff is now dissipated and gone. The conversations we are having with people at the moment are pure, they are authentic, and they are real. And it is absolutely about time that happened too. On the back of that, consequently, it means the quality of the relationships and therefore the business that is happening is much, 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 much better than it's ever been before, as far as I'm concerned. So I think there's a real positive thing that's come out from it. And I think those organizations that have and are embracing that are really winning at the moment.
So you're saying the tolerance for BS has disappeared, and people's like, they're not interested in engaging in that type of conversation. It's more like get to the point style, or at least identify quickly, is there going to be an opportunity? Because no one's got the time to kiss that many frogs, let's say. That's an interesting. Go ahead.
You know, when you go to a networking event, you go to a party, it doesn't really matter what it is, and someone comes up to you and say, hey, Hung, what did you do this weekend? Not because they're interested in your answer, it's because they want to tell you what they did this weekend. And that is what sales has been for so many years in our industry. And now people ask you a question because when people say to you, like, Hung, how are you? They actually genuinely mean it. They generally consider and care about your answer. That changes the dynamics of a sales conversation. It changes the dynamics of our relationships with clients and candidates. I think that is brilliant and really, really about timely as well, because it's been like that for so long.
Interesting. Thoughts on that, Adam?
Well,
has there been less bullshit or
oh yeah, no, no, James is right. Absolutely. I mean, nobody's like meeting up with people for a coffee online just to catch up, you know. So not in my world anyway. So I agree. I think people are getting to the point much more. There's less. I think there's objectives for every meeting. Nobody wants to be on Zoom. So, you know, if you're doing it, then you're doing it with an objective in mind. You know, set an agenda at the start of the meeting, have objectives and get them fulfilled. And if not, don't be that person again. You know,
I was going to say, I mean, has Zoom helped in its own way in the sense that we have an aversion to it and we don't want to just have a chat. It's like, you know, tell us what you want, mate, and then we'll get on with it.
Can I ask this question? And Adam, this is not disagreeing with what you said. I'm just really fascinated by this because so many people say that we've all got Zoom fatigue and we all dislike Zoom and that type of stuff. I bloody love Zoom. I think it is amazing because I am so much more productive now with my client relationship, everything I have to do. When I meet a client face to face now, it's a genuine reason I want to meet them face to face. If I want to do sales conversations, advisory stuff, doing it on Zoom is phenomenal. I'm having conversations with people in Australia before I even wake up and have breakfast. That type of stuff. I couldn't do that. It's amazing. You know, so I think Zoom's brilliant. I don't have an issue with Zoom fatigue. I haven't seen it yet. Maybe I have got it. I don't look very smart, as we said at the beginning. So maybe I do have fatigue. I don't know.
No, sure. But James, the point I'm making is more so we're doing less kind of let's get together and catch up meetings than people I think were before. And I entirely agree. I'm far more productive doing 5 meetings a day online than I was trying to do 5 meetings a day, like trekking around London trying to do it. So you definitely get a lot more done. And it's the great thing is that everybody else now knows how to do it. Whereas previously I was just invited to so many meetings in person, and being in Glasgow and your customer base is in London and New York and whatever. It's not, it's just that's not really doable. So I'm definitely much more productive because of that.
Yeah, we had a meetup yesterday with 120 recruitment leaders for the day. It was a social day. We played some golf and that type of stuff. We didn't talk about business at all. We talked about each other, people, families, and that sort of thing. That to me is what a face-to-face really is about. I've spoken to 4 of them already today since on Zoom, back in my shed here in my house, because that's where I want to talk about business because it's focused and we get on with it. So if there's a hybrid between the two, it's great, I think. One or the other.
Yes. So that's a really interesting insight, you two, in the sense that we've divided what medium and what type of conversation occurs on those mediums. We're much more disciplined about wasting people's time. A meeting is so much more important. A face-to-face meeting now is a big commitment for everyone. Everyone understands that. Whereas before, to your point, Adam, it was maybe casually thrown out as an exploratory thing, or casually thrown out as, oh, let's just, literally beat around the bush. Actually, Louise and I were having this conversation where oftentimes she and I guess we're people that, have a decent network, etc. So we often get people who try to get us in meetings. Can I show you this product? I'll show you that. And both of us shared exactly the same response. It was like, not really. What exactly do you want me to do? Do you want me to then go out and endorse your product? I'm not going to do that because I have a role to stay agnostic on product. I can't be just waxing lyrical about it because you sold me on a Zoom call. I'm not interested in this. This is not something I need. But you got to be specific on the request. Like, why exactly do you want this meeting?
Exactly.
What is the output you're wanting? And then I'll tell you whether I can do it or not, or whether it makes sense for me to do it or not. And then, we're not wasting time.
Exactly. I haven't had a professional face-to-face meeting in 15 months, and I've grown my business by 280%, much faster than it was pre-pandemic. Partially that's because of the timing, though, my business has got to the point where we've got to, if you're familiar with the crossing the chasm analogy, we're kind of at the chasm. And then the second reason is, as I said earlier, I think so many more people have spent the time really trying to understand, are we doing things the right way? And actually that candidate ID thing that I wasn't looking at previously because I was too busy, I am going to spend a little bit of time evaluating it now. So I think people have spent a bit of time working out if they are doing things in the optimal way. And that's really benefited me in a big way.
Yeah, and if you think one thing that's come out of COVID, the value of our time is now is quadruple. I've only seen my mother twice in 18 months. Trust me, when I get a free hour next, I'm going to go and see my mother for the third time. I'm not going to go and maybe do some window shopping of a new tech platform that I could probably look at on the call in my shed.
Yeah, it's a change game. So this actually leads us to the final point I want to touch on before we let everyone go. Like, how has sales changed with the? Because I can imagine 18 months ago, recruitment sales was all about like that. It was phone based, it was email based, it was hammering out like that. Suddenly everyone gets like tuned up on how to do Zoom. Suddenly we're sending video messages. We're doing different types of ways to communicate. What is the most effective way for me to introduce my services to a person that doesn't know about my services? Like, what's your recommendation as, successful entrepreneurs that have built businesses? Obviously, you've had experience of opening sales. How would you go about and do that in today's world?
Yeah, and the reality about living on Zoom in a virtual world is the depth of our relationships and our conversation is less, because you can't get close. You can't really, literally, as the expression says, touch the flesh. So what needs to increase is the number of touches you have with people to be able to get that nurturing and that trust and that rapport and everything else. So what's happened is it's less, the conversations are not as deep as they were when we're face to face, but we're doing a lot more of them. So the sales cycle now, not necessarily longer, but there are more touches in that sales cycle. The second piece is, and this is, I love this because I'm seeing it so much at the moment. I'm a massive fan of marketing. I think marketing is such an important part of the sales process. I get frustrated as hell when I see marketing sitting over that side of the room and sales sitting over that side of the room. Marketing and sales are the same thing. They link together. Every bit of marketing you do you have to be able to see the ROI that in the outputs that it does from a sales point of view. So what's now happened is a lot more savvy recruiters and savvy recruitment and businesses have linked marketing and sales together. They are now one thing. They are part of the same sales pipeline, and the conversion, the conversation is all the way through it. There are more touches through that process, but they're completely aligned.
I agree. I agree with what James just said about sales and marketing. And in fact, I don't really sell to anybody. I only now talk to people that have come through a marketing funnel, quite honestly. They've watched videos, they've downloaded our white papers, they've read the playbook, and they're basically ready to buy. So we don't have any salespeople in our business. But again, that it might not be a very good piece of information for people, because it could be to do with the stage of my company and coinciding with the pandemic. But the bit I don't quite agree with what James just said is around the depths of relationships. So I've probably got I'm actually probably talking to more people than I was pre-pandemic, but I've also built better relationships with them, because the necessity to be with them in person for a meeting has disappeared. So if you get a cadence of one first stage meeting on Monday, the second stage meeting on Thursday, the third stage meeting the following Tuesday, I can condense my sales process from what previously might have been 2 months down to like 2-3 weeks before there's a decision. Yeah. And actually, I've been able to really move things faster.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you. All I'm saying is I think there are a few more touches now that we do. So rather than having one big meeting in London, coming back with a proposal, and then 3 months later in the follow-up meeting, it's now hour type stuff back to back, or 30 minutes even back to back. We've got one of the members who's just gone down to a 4-day week with his business, and he's now, because he's now limited on time, he's now saying every meeting will be a maximum of 15 minutes.
Yep, that's a brilliant idea.
This is awesome.
I insisted on 30 about 12 months ago. I think I insisted on, and everybody in my company, if you've got a meeting that's more than 30 minutes, you haven't prepared properly for it. And that's not always strictly true, because it depends on what people are doing. If they're brainstorming things, they might need a little bit longer. But the other thing I should say is I generated 0 sales. The honest truth is I generated 0 sales between March and September last year. Like nothing at all. Not one company bought my product in that time. And I think the reason for that is because they all basically got a bomb dropped on top of them. And, buying new technologies, evaluating new ways of doing things was absolutely not something they were doing at that point. But from September, everything changed from my vantage point.
Yeah, I think the V-shaped recovery, as you described, James, is accurate. It's a very steep decline to almost the rock bottom, where there's a secession of a lot of business, to be honest with you, deep freeze, and then there's like this bounce back and it's Ving upwards. And hopefully a lot of us listening to this are on that sort of line, and perhaps there's people listening in who are thinking about setting up a business at this moment, and maybe inspired to do so. Let's end it by addressing those folks. So let's say there's a young person out there. Doesn't have to be a young person, maybe young in their career or whatever it is, young in their entrepreneurial path, like similar to Katrina. Previously had a very successful corporate career, and then jumped into it. Similar to Alex as well, same journey. What advice would you give to a recruitment entrepreneur who is thinking about it? They need some sort of insight or some words from you to make sure that they're making that right decision. What are your final thoughts on that? Go to you, James.
Well, I think Adam mentioned it right at the beginning, and I think there's a couple of people who mentioned it on the post. I mean, the first thing is there's a big difference between a great recruiter and running a great business. They're two completely different things. I know some amazing recruiters are awful business owners. I know some amazing business owners are awful recruiters, and everywhere in between. So you've got to learn the traits of being a business owner, and part of that entrepreneurial business ownership type thing is building a business that is, number one, is sustainable. Has to be sustainable, and then number 2 has to be scalable. Now, scalability doesn't necessarily mean that you want to have 50 offices around the world and 100 people working for you. Scalable means it has to be able to give you the growth that you personally want, whether it be growth in lifestyle, growth in dividends, or growth in whatever it might be. And the third thing, and I love the fact that Katrina just wrote this, because I absolutely agree. There is no doubt in my mind that being an entrepreneur is bloody hard work. I have never in my life worked as hard as I've worked in the last 12 months. And I can find you a million people who can say exactly the same thing. When you run a business, the buck stops with you, and you have sleepless nights thinking about everything within your business. It is a hard journey. You have got to fall in love with hard work. Absolutely critical, because if you don't, you won't be successful. And yes, you'll get to a pivot point where things start to cruise a little bit, and you've got a bit more sustainability, and you've got people in your business and annuity revenue and everything else. But you've got to get to that cruise point first of all, and that is an uphill battle with lots of issues, lots of challenges, lots of great times as well. But don't ever come into this thinking this is going to be a smooth sailing. Use the analogy. They say great sailors weren't made in smooth seas, and that's the reality of running a business.
Yeah, really good point. So one of the first things is, look, don't assume that the entrepreneurial path is necessarily for you just because you're, upset with your company or whatever. You got to really understand what's involved in that, and know yourself as a person before you get involved. Okay, Adam, final word to you. A word of advice to a young person, or I keep saying young person, but a person who's thinking about this entrepreneurial path.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how knowledgeable or skillful you are at anything at all. If you haven't got the right personal characteristics to do it, you need to be prepared that you're going to find that out very quickly. And so you need to be unmoved by failure. You need to be unfazed by risk. You need to be patient. You need to be tenacious. And if you take offense easily, then you're not the right person to do it. And quite honestly, most people aren't.
Yep. That's really, really good. And that's like real talk, real talk right there, which is fantastic. Okay, that's about it, folks. We're running over time as usual. Also, the sun has gone in where I'm sitting, and it's actually quite chilly here. So I need to get myself back to where the rays are. So thank you very much, James and Adam. Great to see you contribute to this show. We'll definitely get you two back on and talk about this. This is interesting. I don't know whether you think, guys, but essentially, I'm always interested in speaking to recruitment entrepreneurs, simply because it's you've had to just like live on your feet a little bit, and to duck and dive your way through it. So fascinating to see. Okay, have a good weekend, you two.
Great to see you guys.
Thanks for
Thank you.
having me. All the best.
That was cool, wasn't it, Louise?
It was very cool.
Super interesting. And I think you and I are probably most similar in terms of businesses at this point, where we're dealing with networks and communities more than anything. That's probably a different type of business altogether, isn't it? So maybe worth talking about that at some point.
Totally. And one of the things neither of them said, but it's relevant to both of them, is about having the right people around you as well and being in the right places. So building a community of people who support you, like James, like Adam, like you, coming to things like this, which is a massive support in growing a business, not being an island, but thinking about, the stuff you don't know. You don't know it until someone tells you or you learn it.
Do you know what? That's such an important thing. I'm just reminded now of some of the conversations I've had with people who've set up businesses and not been like successful with it. And I think that's a key component. They're rattling around dealing with it by themselves. Yeah. And, you need to have a cohort of people that are in the same, I wouldn't say in the same boat, but we're using like sailing analogies, let's say, but at least in the same sea, that could give you a few hints and tips. So make sure you build that. Again, it comes down to, understanding you need to build these relationships well in advance of you needing them. And it shouldn't necessarily even be a strategy. I mean, hopefully it's an emergent characteristic of your personality, that you'd want to take an interest in what people are doing, and you care about that, without having a fixed agenda on that relationship. That's the sort of way in which you can build good relationships with folks in the industry. Okay, that's about it, I think. So thank you very much, everybody, for paying attention. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Louise, thank you so much for joining and being such a hero as a co-pilot. Really great having you here. Thank you again to our sponsors, Greenhouse. Make sure you check them out if you're looking to upgrade an ATS, greenhouse.io. By the way, on that note, I'll be interviewing the joint founders of Greenhouse, John Strosser and Daniel Chait, later on this year as part of the Founders Focus series. So make sure you tune into that also. Okay, final thing, if you've enjoyed this show, follow the channel. We do this every week. Next week, we are talking about how to be a better talent leader. So how do you be a better leader in TA? We've got some wonderful guests to help us with that show. So make sure you tune in. Okay, that's about it, everyone. We'll see you the next time.